canisters. It didn't matter. It wasn't nearly as manufactured and as uniform as the Union ordinance that was up there. I mean, if you look at even all of those that are around there, it's a range of calibers. You know, Union munitions will all be, you know, if it's 2.5 inches, then they'll all be 2.5 inches. But these are all just sort of half cast in multiple different armories and blacksmith shops and whatever. They were just packing things in there to just explode and cause havoc out there. And so these are the larger, the 8-inch, 10-inch shells, and these are the big ones. These weigh like 100 pounds out there, and we ended up finding 2 of these in the river. There were supposed to be hundreds of them in there, and I'll talk probably why we think there weren't hundreds of them when we got into the river at that point. But these are the big ones. These are like the giant size, bowling ball size cannonballs that you have out there. And we've got 2, I didn't bring them because they're 100 pounds, and I didn't want to kill myself out. But these are the ones we have are currently in conservation tanks going through electrolysis and getting all the rust off and all the coal tar that was stuck on there. So we did get a couple of those. And if you look carefully, you can still find a couple of those, and this is part of the reason why we think we did not get all of them. People tend to dive in that river, tend to have found some stuff here and there. And this is, I don't remember, this is an older live log. This is probably from 2010, 2012, what's it, 2008, somewhere out there. So, you know, who knows what one, you know, add another a 1 in front of that number is probably what they're going for now out there. But they're out there, and people can find them. And you know, we talked to a few collectors and folks that had some items from the Congaree River and talked to them, and everybody was let us take some photos and kind of add that to our story and our inventory for our final report out here. And these are just sort of the different fuses, and I won't go into a whole lot of detail on it, but you know, some of the smooth bore cannonball type ones, it's a cork and it's a little paper fuse, and you can see the little tick marks on it, and it'll be like a second here and there. You just have your guys in the cannons cut it to 3 seconds, light it, shoot it, and then 3 seconds later it'll explode. That's the high technology. And as things got a little better, you know, it turned into some screw-in fuses and some fuses with some black powder. I'll show you the next one, which turns into a story itself, until kind of the final Borman fuse, which is pretty interesting. It's a kind of a pewter screw-in fuse, and the guys that are shooting out the cannons, they have a little key, and you would click, take your key, and hit 1, 2, or 3 seconds in there. When the cannon fired, the spark would drop into this chamber where you clicked the little hole in it. One part of the little ring chamber of black powder would just go to a dead end, and then the other would go 3 seconds, fall into the fuse chamber, and then light the black powder that's in the middle of the fuse, and then blow up there. But these are interesting because when you have these and throw these in a river, they are completely sealed and airtight. So all the black powder is still completely sealed and airtight. And that's foreshadowing. So, and then some of the rest, many different kinds of bullets and mini balls, ball cartridges, musket balls. We kept finding these little BBs out there, and I had asked Jim Legg what they were, but it's so that, you know, you get your little paper cartridge, and it's a regular musket ball, and then the 3 little balls on top, and they shoot out, and it's just like, you know, a little buckshot kind of thing. It's just another way to try to stop people a little bit and get stung and cause people to slow down and just cause chaos on the battlefield. So we kept finding a bunch of those little ones, and had to call in the experts to figure out what they were before we threw them away. All right, let's go on to this. All right, so that's the site. That's how we got here. All the ordnance was dumped in that river over the course of 2 days. But here's why we don't think we found all the stuff that was originally thrown in there. For years after the war, even the days after the war, people would go down there, and everybody had muskets back then. They'd just go and grab whatever they could off the riverbanks. The river at that time was really high in a flood event, and so as the Union troops were throwing stuff in there, what they thought was far into the river was just a couple feet. 2 days later, river's back to normal, and it's just littered with shots and ammunition and mini balls and stuff like that. So that's part of the reason why some of that stuff is gone. And then people have known about it since it was there. And as people are canoeing, fishing, walking down the river, they start finding stuff. There's reports from the state that in 1930, fishermen found a lot of this ordnance in a small tributary. If any of you walked, there's like a little river walk. You can park down at the end of Sediment Street, and it's a little walkway that goes under the bridge to the museum, and there's a little creek that runs right under that bridge, and that's where some of the stuff was dumped. That's where one of the arms of the road that was down there at the end of Sediment Street ended up. So that's where some fishermen found some stuff. Back in the 30s, also in the 30s, the New Brooklyn mayor, there was a drought somewhere back then, and the rivers, and you've probably seen it too, there's times with the river, you can just walk those rocks and get out there. And this was so low that all this ordnance that was further and deeper into the river started showing up. And the mayor of New Brooklyn just got a bunch of people, and they all walked out there and started collecting stuff. And they collected 2,000 pieces and those are just 2,000 that are on display. Who knows how many other things. But the newspaper report said he thinks they got everything out of the river that was in the river that they could. And I can just imagine, just like, hey, the mayor coming over, let's go take all this stuff out of the river. But the crazy thing about it is, we don't know where 2,000 artifacts from the river are. There's not 2,000 artifacts on eBay anywhere. We think, talking with W.C. Smith and Jim Legg, we think it's probably was like in the mayor's basement of his house. All these rusty old iron cannonballs, and his wife is probably like, get these out of the basement. Throw them away. What are we doing with all this rusty garbage in the bunch of metal somewhere? So some of them probably got melted down, some got thrown away, some handed out for Christmas gifts, whatever, somewhere out there. And this other one, 1938, 2 high school kids were fishing or messing around on the river, and they found an artillery projectile point, and the state newspapers got an article about it. And high school kids, of course, did the right thing and started hitting it with a hammer, and then that caused a big deal out there, and that was one of them. So people have been looking at stuff out here. Divers, even now, people kind of have been going in and out. But so this is the reason why. So that's the reason why it's there, and this is the reason why we had to get some of the stuff out. Manufactured gas plant in downtown Columbia was producing it, and it's up by where the old bus station is. It's a big, it's all vacant lot now, but that's where it was. As a product of this manufactured gas that kept all the gas lamps on was this creosote-like, tar-like material, and they just dumped it in that little creek, and this is the creek I was talking about. And it all washed down from the manufactured gas plant, and then it came into the river and hit the cold water of the river and just made this plume of coal tar. And there were places where it was like 1.5 feet thick, and it turned it, and it smelled like just hot asphalt on a hot day, real sticky, real tarry, and real that gas-like diesel smell out there. So back in, I think we have it on the next slide, about in 2010, I don't have that slide there, but in 2010, people were down there. There used to be a little alluvial fan down there. People would go fishing or wading, or they'd inner tube down there. Somebody was walking in the river and got a bunch of coal tar on their feet, and they called the river keeper. River keeper came and looked at it. They tried to trace it out, and they traced it out to that manufactured gas plant. Over the course of a number of acquisitions, that manufactured gas plant became a property of Dominion. And so Dominion, with DHEC, entered into a voluntary cleanup program to get rid of this coal tar that's been in the river out there. So it was there, and it took them a few years to kind of get that permit, and I'll talk a little bit about it as we go. But this is how the recovery of these artifacts started. SCIA, the South Carolina archaeologist, there's a South Carolina state underwater archaeologist that some of you probably know. You can get salvage licenses and diver's license, amateur license, to go and excavate or dive in the rivers and the waterways of South Carolina and find that stuff. So one of the earlier ones was back in the 80s, a number of folks tried to do it. And this is W.C. Smith and his crew. And we're kind of piggybacking on sort of the shoulders of giants as they came in and kind of did all this work. They did a whole lot of this early research and found some of this stuff. So talking with WC was invaluable to this project. And as kind of an archaeologist, and James, where he went, talking with the collectors and the people that are actually out there interested in the sites, and they may not be professional archaeologists, but they probably know 10 times more than we do about specific sites. So getting with folks like that is really important when you get to a site like that. And so these guys in the 80s, I mean, they did a whole, they bought in their own backhoes, they bought in their own boats, their diving equipment. Let's go on to the next one. I think I got another slide. Oh yeah, they kind of built up some of their own roads down there. They built that, so that road, they used to go from Senate Street down to the alluvial. They built that road. It used to be a riverbank. No one cared back then. You can do whatever you want out there. But they got these guys. There's one guy cleaning off one of the cannonballs he found. So if you remember the big 100-pound cannonballs that I talked about before, these guys found a cache of them in the river of about 20 of them. They were in kind of a deep pocket in the river. And they found it late in the day, and they went back to the hotel and were like, yeah, we're going to go get these tomorrow. Apparently it's a big deal in the diver community back then, but somebody came in that night and poached their cannonballs. They took them out. They got out there, they got 2 or 3 out of the 20 or so they found the day before. And they know who did it, and it's been a decades-long fight between these guys. People that used to be friends were not talking anymore, and it's still a sore subject with WC if you bring that one up on that one. Let's go to the next one here. All right, and so this is where we start coming in. That coal tar was found 2010. Dominion, SCANA back then, started looking at it and started looking at finding ways to mitigate that coal tar. They got an underwater archaeology team out there who did some side scan sonar and some magnetometer studies just to see, they heard stories that there was ordnance down there and cannonballs. So the sonar, the magnetometer, found all these different metal anomalies down there. They knew some were probably just tires and old engine parts and whatever was just thrown in the river. But they had to treat it like it potentially could be ordnance and cannonballs down there because they know from 1930s and all these salvage operation archaeologists that stuff was down there. So in 2012, they started planning that ordinance. We got involved and started doing some initial archaeology on the riverbanks part. It's all kind of Ginyard property up there. There's a number of other archaeological sites right on that riverbank. There's an old mill site up there. There's a pre-contact Native American site that's right on the riverbank that it was eroding into the river. So we had to kind of look at all of that and make sure that SCANA and Dominion were avoiding some of those sensitive areas, and that they were going to be good stewards of the archaeology out there. And I do have to give Dominion credit for that. There's a few guys out there that were really excited about the archaeology and real strong advocates of the archaeology and the excavation of that stuff when we went out there. So we were ready to go in 2015. We started on September 29th, 2015. And then September 30th, our site was 30 feet underwater. So there was starting, and here it is all the way up to the bridge there. So when the canal burst, 20,000 metric tons of sediment washed downstream on top of this site. So they went back to the drawing board to try to figure it out. They went through a couple, and this is why it took so long. They went through a couple plans. Initially, they thought maybe that sediment capped it enough to where no one, the coal tar was all gone and it would have been capped forever just by the happenstance of the soil from the canal laying on top of it. But over the years, it started washing away. And so eventually the coal tar started showing up again. Dominion had a plan to cap it in place and just put down their own cap on top of it. The river keeper and the Corps didn't necessarily like that plan because eventually that cap would probably fail a little bit. And so they finally came to a final understanding of a plan to mitigate an area where the most human traffic would be the shallowest parts, where people could wade into the water and go fishing and still kind of make it a nice river here. And that took years. So 2023, we're finally back. And this is probably what you all saw. They built the big cofferdam around there. Initially, their plan was to build a cofferdam that was like 3 acres and come all the way down here and clear all of it. But they were able to kind of get to that plan and the agreement with the riverkeeper and some other interested parties and the Corps of Engineers to get the main part where would be most likely people could be impacted by that coal tar. So there's still, a little bit of coal tar in and around in between these areas. So they built a larger cofferdam here, and then a smaller one further downstream to get another little area that was impacted by the coal tar. So they built that, dewatered it. These are all the pumps that it took to dewater. They were all worried about another hurricane coming through. And if you come over the I-26 and saw that little cofferdam by the canal right then, and the water's over the